everyone, welcome back to the ZACHGP channel, and in today's very special video I have planned for all of you my F1 fantasy price predictions for every single asset in the game for the 2026 season. Now, if you want to know, I am recording this on the 10th of February, which is literally a day before the first proper test starts in Bahrain, because we'll have 2 tests there. So this is high time that I get on the bandwagon and talk about my price predictions before we have a little bit more to go off. Then I'd have a slight little edge more to where the prices could be. However, the way I've done it is I'm just going to be going through every single team and their drivers from 11th, so Cadillac will start at 11th, all the way to 1st in 2025. And I'll be saying if I believe they'll be higher or lower than their 2025 starting price. And I'll actually be giving my legit price prediction to the closest 0.5 throughout the entire video. So heading into the first constructor and drivers, of course, is Cadillac. Because they weren't involved with the 2025 season, we have to start with them. They are technically 11th place because they didn't take part. And this one's quite nice and easy because we have nothing to go off for 2025. So I can't say if it's going to be higher or lower than anything else. But for me, Cadillac's going to come in at 6.5 million. As a constructor, they will most likely be very close to what Sauber's price was last season because they're most likely going to be the back marker team. So I could very much see it being around 6.5. But in a weird fashion, which you don't see a lot from constructors being cheaper than both their drivers, I do think because of their driver pairing individually, we'll actually see Sergio Perez at 7 million, slightly below Valtteri Bottas at 7.5. The reason I think he gets that edge is I don't think they'll take this into consideration, his grid penalty. It does make him a better asset, but also Bottas at the end of his career was performing slightly better than Perez. You could say it's hard to compare them because they were such different teams, but even when Bottas got dropped out of Mercedes a long time ago now, but when that did happen, he was performing at a higher level than when Perez got dropped by Red Bull, etc, etc. So for me, that's why I think Bottas will go slightly higher, but none of them are breaking over 8 million. I'd be very, very surprised if they did. Don't be surprised if actually the drivers are slightly less expensive than that as well. Then coming in with the 10th constructor assets, and of course we go all the way over to Alpine. Wow, look how lovely this little table looks. You can see where I've been trying to do. Some of them get a little bit messy, I won't lie. Like racing balls, what the hell colour do I use there? But for Alpine in 10th place, I think it's going to be a much better season for them F1 fantasy wise. They should have a slightly better car, hopefully. I think they will, just because if that Mercedes engine is legal, again, I'm doing all of this while that's all going on as well, so that could completely shift everything in another direction. But if they continue like that, their 2026 prices will start off most of the time for the constructor lower, I believe at 8.5 million, compared to 9.5 as Alpine in 2025, purely because in 2025, they were going off the 24 final last few races, and Alpine were actually starting to look half decent. Like, not incredibly good, but not as bad as they were. I think after 2025, they'll have to take it with a pinch of salt, whatever Alpine does. They can't be too high. So I do think it will be a lower starting price than in 2025. But for their drivers, it's a bit of a mixed bag, and it's realistically because Colapinto is technically cheating. I could put Doohan 7.2 million, then it could be lower because technically that's where Colapinto started. But if we take Colapinto starting where he actually started out, he was 4.5 million. And at the start of the game, no one's going to start at 4.5 million. So we know with that Colapinto is going to be higher valued than that. I think he's going to be one of the cheaper assets. I do think it will be between him and Lindblad for the cheapest assets in the game starting off. So I can't see him being any more than 6 million. Maybe he could go around the 6.5 million range, around the Perez, Bottas area. But if anyone's going to be cheap, it's going to be Colapinto. Unless Alpine come out with like an insane car in testing, but I'd be surprised if they still weren't predicted any higher than 6th position. And then the same goes for Gasly. I think they just predicted him slightly high last season. 11.8 million is where he started at, which is just ridiculously highly priced. It was like the Williams last year as well at the start of the season. So he has to be lower than that. But again, I've gone for more of the Yuki Tsunoda range last year when he was in the Racing Bulls. He was 9.6. I think Gasly will be around 9.5 million. I'd be surprised if he was going into the 10 million-ish range, but I think if he was, he just wouldn't be worth using unless Alpine looked phenomenal. Then heading into the 9th constructors assets, we of course have Audi, formerly Sauber, as they would have got all of their stuff as Sauber in 2025. And Audi started off in 2025 at 6.2, Hülkenberg 6.4, and Bortoleto 6 million. So they were very much the backmarker team last year. So that's what I was sort of trying to see relatively where Cadillac would go realistically. And that's why I've gone for that sort of range. Maybe I've gone a little bit higher on Bottas and Perez. But for me, they have to be higher than they were in 2025. 2025, again, they were going off 2024, where Sauber looked absolutely dreadful. They improved quite a bit. And I think, considering that Audi now, they do look like they're not going to be insanely good, but they don't look like they're going to be predicted the worst team of all time in the 2026 grid. You kind of have to put them a little higher. So I think they're going to be around 7 million for the constructor. Still one of the cheapest constructors, but definitely not the cheapest one. Hülkenberg will be 8 million. I just think it's one of those situations where we saw his experience last year was really good. 8 million seems about right for someone like Hülkenberg at the start of the season. And then Bortoleto, a slight increase to 6.5 because we've seen he can be an F1, but he wasn't the ideal F1 fantasy person to have in your team. So he's not going to be anything crazy above what he was in 2025. Especially with how DNF heavy he was at the end of the season, maybe it's someone we just don't go near. Then heading into the 8th constructors asset, and that of course is Haas. Now, Haas has Ocon and Behrman as their drivers. Last year, they started at 7 million, 7.3 million, and 6.7 million. Don't say it. Don't say it. Now, will they be higher or lower than in 2025? Well, again, it's a bit of a mixed bag. We'll start off with the constructor. And again, I think it's going to be better than it was in 2025. They did improve in 2025 compared to 2024. And now without a rookie in their team, I think just naturally Haas will go up a little bit. They look half decent right now. I could easily see them being around 8 million, basically the similar range to where the Alpine will be. Then with Ocon, I think he'll be slightly lower. We saw Behrman was the better option averagely for our F1 Fantasy last year. I think they'll take that into consideration. He won't be more expensive than Behrman. He'll be around 7 million. And then Behrman will go around stable, around 8 million. I think that's about right, considering they'll be about the 7th fastest team potentially. Perfect conditions for an 8 million F1 Fantasy driver. Nothing too crazy, nothing too outrageous. I could see him being 9 million, but we're pushing it a little bit. If he's any for half than that, I don't think it'd be usable if he was above 10 million, same as Gasly. Then heading into Aston Martin, our 7th team to talk about. And again, Aston Martin, constructor-wise, I could see them being quite a bit higher. I think it's going to be higher on every single asset. They've obviously got Adrian Newey. They do have that Honda engine, so I could be miles off here if they don't show anything in testing. But if they even show a glimpse of being potentially in the top 5 or top 6, Alonso will be overinflated, Aston Martin will be overinflated because of that, and it just drags them all the way up, which we didn't see obviously in 2025 and 2024. That's why I was so low. And I think Aston Martin as a constructor will go up to around 11 million, closest to where that Williams started out last season. I think Alonso will be 12 million, which sounds about right. If the reliability is half good, Alonso probably would be worth that sort of price. However, again, I could also see this one being very, very wrong, because Alonso is the type of driver that they would overinflate if they were worried about the Aston Martin being fast. So if the Aston Martin is slightly faster than I think it will be, I could easily see him going up to like 16, 17 million. And then everyone just being like, well, we're not going near Alonso then, are we? And then Stroll again, not really anything crazy. I think he'll go up to 9 million. But he wasn't half bad in F1 Fantasy terms last year. Just he's a bang average driver if that Aston Martin's half decent, which is why he'd probably go around 9 million. Probably not at the top of our list to bring in, but 9 million sounds about right for the start of 2026. Then heading into Racing Bulls, and I actually think Racing Bulls is probably the team that's going to drop in constructors' price and assets everywhere. And I do think with Lawson and Lindblad, there's just so many unknowns. Realistically, the only team with an actual rookie on the grid, so they're going to get penalised for that on their prices as well. And when Lawson started at 18 million technically at Red Bull, we know he's going to be lower as well. That's a good prediction from me there, don't you worry. But I think Racing Bulls will probably equal out on their constructor. I think about 8 million sounds about right for them. Normally, these sorts of constructors, they go from 6 million to around 13 million at the start of the season, the B tier assets. And Racing Bulls are just bang average, which is why they go around the middle. However, Lawson, of course, he'll be lower, but I think quite a bit lower. I think he'll be around the 7 million range. I don't have very high hopes of Racing Bulls, so that's what I'm going off. I think they'll probably be the 8th, 9th fastest car on the grid, which means they're not going to be expensive, especially with the likes of Lawson and Lindblad. And then Lindblad being the only rookie, I think he'll be placed very similar to Colapinto at around the 6 million range. Nothing much to say there. He's just an F2 driver heading into F1 for the first season of his career. They're never going to put him that high. If he goes above 7.5 million, I'd be surprised. Then heading into the 5th constructor assets, which of course was Williams. Now, I've actually gone quite high for Williams, considering what we've seen so far on the shakedown. But I do think Williams, with the caliber of driver they have, like the Sainz and Albon, very similar to Alonso. We saw it in 2025. They'll probably overinflate their prices just in case Williams have got it right, sort of thing. So their 2025 starting prices were 13.1, 13.1 and 12.0. And I think they're all going to be lower. So this is one of the only teams that I think all of the assets will be lower in value than they were in 2025. 2025, they very much looked very good after testing. I don't expect them to do the exact same thing this season. So I think they'll drop slightly with the constructor around 11 million. Sainz around 11.5 because of his form at the end of 2025, and Albon around 11 million. Very, very equal between them, and I think it's just because you can't really guess out of those three who's going to be cheaper, who's going to be more expensive. They're all half-decent assets, maybe not Williams as a constructor as a whole, but especially Sainz and Albon, they're those type of drivers. Gasly, Albon, Sainz, Alonso, Hulkenberg. These are the sorts of B-tier drivers that would most likely be overinflated over that 10-11 million range if it was to happen to someone, and that's why I've put them there. I really do think they won't be touched in Australia if that does happen, but that's still where I think they'll go for F1 Fantasy. Now heading into the top 4 teams, and of course we have to make a little quick pit stop at Ferrari. They have Ferrari, Leclerc and Hamilton as their assets. In 2025, they started at the ridiculous price of 27.1 million, 25.9 million and 24.2. I can tell you, again, like Williams, all of their assets will be cheaper. If they're going off, which I think they'll go off, the testing plus slightly the form of 2025, Ferrari cannot be this expensive, and I think they'll be much more like what Mercedes was at the start of 2025. Mercedes was around 23-ish million at the start, the cheaper side of those A-tier constructors. I think Ferrari will start around 22 million. Then for the drivers, I do think Leclerc will be more expensive than Hamilton, but there's not going to be much in it between all of them again. I think Leclerc will start off at 21.5 million. Again, they're probably going to be around the 4th fastest car. That's what my head's thinking around where Ferrari's pricing would be. If that was the case, this would be it. And Hamilton would be on the cheaper side after what we saw at the final part of last year at around 20 million. So I do think these could be bargains if it does happen. But it's just because I do think Mercedes, McLaren and Red Bull will come out with something stronger, and then they will take up those more expensive roles. Now, actually heading on to Red Bull in 3rd in the constructors last season, we actually have the first super duper interesting decision on our hands, because it's really, really hard to always figure out where the upper limit's going to be in F1 Fantasy every starting year. So last year, Red Bull started at 25.2, Verstappen 28.4 and Hadjar 6.2. Red Bull last year started way too high up at 25.2. That's why I think they're going to go lower. They're going to learn from their mistakes and put them around 23.5, because even with Hadjar in that car with new regs, if it's anything like we've seen from the second Red Bull driver seat before, Red Bull shouldn't be that high up, and I think they're going to take that into consideration, putting them around that 23.5 million-ish range. Again, realistically where Mercedes-ish were last year, technically where Red Bull were as well last year. It's not that much of a difference. But with Verstappen and Hadjar, I think both of them are going to be higher. Hadjar, of course, because he's started off so cheap in the Racing Bulls, but I think he'll be very much around that Antonelli-Lawson price range that they were last year, around 18.5 million. He's just way too much of an unknown. If he's any higher than that, I just don't think anyone's going to be looking at him. Don't think anyone's going to be looking at him anyway at 18.5. It's just such a weird price range for the 100 million cost cap we're working with at the start of the season. And then Verstappen, I have to put him higher. Verstappen in 2025, they priced him bearing in mind that McLaren looked like the absolute dominant fastest car on the grid, and he still got 28.4. But with it being so up in the air and him almost winning the championship last season, if Red Bull put on a shift that I think they will do in testing, I think he'll be even higher than last year, and I think he might be the most expensive asset in the game at 29.5 million. Would it be worth it? I don't think so. I really don't think so. But I do think he's another driver in F1 Fantasy where they'll overinflate him if they even think he's getting anywhere close to being at the top, because they don't want to see a repeat of anyone being way too low on the budget side. Then we get into Mercedes, the second place constructor assets last year. But this year, they're looking very, very good from the shakedown, from what they've been talking about with their car. And with that on board, I've kind of got to do my price predictions with that in mind. They join Aston Martin as one of the only teams to be going up higher in starting price, in my opinion, with all of their assets from 2025, as they started on 22.7, 21.0 and 18.4 million last year. No way in hell are they starting anywhere close to that. Again, Mercedes will be another one, like Ferrari last year, even if they don't perform, where they'll be put higher than they should be. And actually, Ferrari last year is basically where I've been trying to put Mercedes this year, with a slight little bit more to it than that. But Ferrari's where I put the relative scale of where I think Mercedes would be placed. Considering Ferrari, everyone was thinking they're going to be in a championship fight last year, and that's sort of how F1 Fantasy was looking at it. But Mercedes as a constructor, higher 100% at 28 million. I think they'll be the most expensive constructor heading into F1 Fantasy. Again, it can't be as high as McLaren was last year because I don't think it'll be as clear cut, but it will definitely be very, very high on the high end. Russell will be the second most expensive driver asset. Again, I think he'll be 29 million because if the Mercedes is that fast, again, he'll most likely be the number one driver. F1 Fantasy is going to take that into consideration. Going to put him at 29 million. And similar to McLaren last year with Piastri, Antonelli, I think he's only going to come in at 22.5 million. And he is going to be the bargain. Hopefully you can do a Piastri last year if that's how it works out. Bargain of an A-tier driver. But again, I don't think they're going to put... If they put Piastri last year in a McLaren, dominant McLaren, 23 million, I might actually be being generous to Antonelli at 22.5. They might put him even lower than that. It's going to be so interesting seeing where Antonelli fits into all of this. But if you really can put up a fight to Russell, I think we'll be seeing quite a few 2 times on Antonelli. Then finally heading into the final constructor of McLaren's assets. Of course, they won last year. They probably will take that into consideration, but not as much as the testing. And I don't think McLaren are going to be the fastest car heading into Australia. Potentially, they're going to be overweight. We still don't know if they're going to fix that in time. But 2025 starting price, 30 million. 29 million for Norris and 23 million for Piastri. Almost another team that was going to go under for me for the starting prices of 2025 compared to 2026. But because of Piastri's ridiculous starting price in 2025, it doesn't work out like that. I think McLaren will drop around 3.5 million to 26.5. I think they'll be comfortably the second constructor that F1 Fantasy will be putting their budgets across. I think I might be being nice there. I think they might put McLaren quite high up and then they're overinflated again just in case anything goes wrong. So I could also see them around 20.5 million around the Mercedes range as well. But I'm hoping it's around 26.5 because even that I think will be quite steep for McLaren at the start of the season. With Norris, again, dropping down. This in 2025 was when he looked like he was the clear favourite. 29 million. He's not looking like the clear favourite. I think he'll drop 3 million to 26 million. And then Piastri, the only reason he's going up is just because last year it was just ridiculously low. He'll go to around 24.5 million. A little bit less than Norris. So I actually think he'll be a better asset than Lando Norris. But again, I don't think we're going to be 2-timesing them unless they look really good again. But I doubt that for Australia. Or if he gets driver of the day. I mean, I'll talk about that more in our best teams when we actually get to the game being released. But those are all of my price predictions for F1 Fantasy heading into 2026. Now, quickly before I end with these price predictions, I actually made 2 mock-up teams for everyone to see with both of the situations we'll find ourselves in heading into Australia like we always do. Do we go to 2 constructors, hedge our bets and hope that we can just survive Australia, or do we go for the budget building side of 1 big constructor? Well, if you go for 2 constructors, well, if it's based on my price predictions, you'd be able to fit in Mercedes, Ferrari, Antonelli as your 2 times, with Behrman, very good B tier asset, Lawson, Bortoletto and Colapinto for 100 million, or if you wanted to go for 1 big constructor, 1 brilliant 2 times option, and a budget building option, I think it'd be Mercedes, Alpine, Russell, Behrman, Bottas, grid penalty, Alonso, Lawson at 100 million. So you can see Alonso, better B tier asset, Russell, better A tier asset. There's good and bad to both of them, but again, that team's very much more of the budget building side, which I think quite a few of us might go down, but those realistically the 2 options you can do. And funnily enough, they both end up at 100 million. So if I've got them bang on, perfect. You know what teams I'll be looking into, well, before testing's taken place. I mean, the game's not coming out for ages anyway, but those are the sorts of teams we will be looking at later on when the game's released. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Comment down below, what do you think your price predictions will be for the 2026 season in F1 Fantasy? Because again, right now it's just one of those fun videos because we haven't seen testing yet. So we have absolutely no idea what their pricing is going to be. And this year, it's very much dependent. It'll be like, I'd say it's about 20-30% of what happened last year because of form and stuff. And then the rest, 70-80% will be on actually testing because that's the only thing we've got to go off on these 2026 regs. It's very different than 2024 was starting over from 2025. So with that in mind, it's anyone's game. Let's see what happens. But thank you all so much for watching. I will be back on Monday for another F1 Fantasy video, which will be my F1 Fantasy predictions. And then I've got another F1 Fantasy video on Wednesday. It's F1 Fantasy videos all over the gaff. But thank you all so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye-bye.